I liked the part where you were saying, like, we were all once foreigners, and so you have to, like, accept people, blah, blah, blah. And I've been thinking about that like, every day lately as, like, we have, like, more Ukrainian people over in Canada, and there's so many people that have, like, my community has changed around my neighborhood. And then I'm thinking about how it used to be, like, mostly Italian families, and there's, like, all, like, their Italian-looking houses. And then I started thinking about when the Irish came to Canada, which is my lineage. And so it's like this, I've been going down this rabbit hole of, like, at one point we were all the foreigners, and someone was like, oh, these Irish people are here. And so, yeah, I've been working through that thought a lot of, like, my community is changing, but, like, it's good. And that was probably what happened when my family came over, and yeah, so it's just a comment.
Yeah, I mean, I love it. And that's the tension I think we're seeing in the scriptures, is the Hebrew people are being pulled in these different directions of wanting to keep their culture and not wanting to be influenced by different religions because they want to stay true to their God, but also their God calling them to say, hey, welcome the foreigner, treat them as a native born, welcome them in, leave space for them around you. And that tension is very real. And I think naming that for ourselves even is good sometimes, to say, hey, I am a little uncomfortable sometimes when my neighborhood looks different than that. Because once you can name that, then you can start to say, okay, well, what's beautiful about that? And what do I now have offered to me that I didn't have before? And how do I see it with fresh eyes? And I think that's the beauty of what God is constantly doing in all of our lives, is calling us to look in new ways, to see new things, and to see the beauty that's around us all the time. Yelena, what do you think?
This is such a good observation, Katie, because I often interact with immigrants as well, and as an immigrant myself, right? It's not only that, like, you, the welcoming party, who is changing, right? It's the immigrants who come as well. They also change over time, and you kind of move. The more you get to know people around you, the more you're immersed in community. You kind of move from understanding to better understanding to better understanding to more acceptance, and it's just this kind of the slow work of, like, giving yourself grace and giving other people grace. And yeah, it kind of ties into what you were talking about, Jeremy, how God is so patient with us and just meeting us where we are and just letting our stories move at the pace that we can keep up with, right? And it's kind of the same thing. Yeah, beautiful observation.
Yeah, I think that is the idea. There's the constancy to grace, God's character, God's love. But the way that God is expressing that love has to come in the context of relationship. And as humanity, we're changing, so that relationship is changing. It's not because God is becoming more loving or changing or becoming more graceful, but it's because that love is constantly shifting as we learn more about ourselves and we learn more about each other. And I love that idea, Yelena, even you said about, we feel like we're changing, but we sometimes don't realize everyone we're interacting with changing. This was happening all the time. And this is not just about immigration and those types of things. Every person that I interact with is changing something about me as I'm learning something from them and I'm influencing them. So what it means to be human is to be in relationship and to be changed by each other. That's a little scary, but it's kind of beautiful as well.
There's one thing that made me confused, is what you had said about, like, if you buy a cloak, you can go for a sword. But Peter did have a sword at the crucifixion part. He cut off the ear, and Jesus stopped him. So that is what confused.
Yeah, this is a tricky one, and this is a passage that I think confuses a lot of people. So you are not alone in this at all, Jason. So Jesus says, go get a sword, and then as soon as they use the sword, he's like, what are you doing? Stop using that sword. Again, I think the context here is that Jesus knows people think he's a criminal. They expect him to fight back against the authorities. And so he's saying, I want to look like that. I want to look the part that they expect me to, so that when I'm nonviolent, so that when I don't play into the stereotypes they expect me to, they'll see the contrast. And that's what he's trying to set up. Unfortunately, the disciples don't seem to get it. And they want to use those weapons in self-defense. And so Jesus shuts them down. So I think Jesus has a sort of theatrical, rhetorical intention in mind there. I think it's very clear when he says, go get this, and here's why. It's because the prophecy is that the Messiah will be numbered with the transgressors, is the language in the NIV. Some translate as rebels or enemies, those types of things. But he wants to be seen that way, specifically that he can say, hey, I'm not what you think I am. And that's the real significance of that story. But it's a tough one to get one, and everybody uses that wrong, at least in my opinion anyway.